Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the marvelous youngster Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. What's going on in the Sunshine State today? Because it's not any sunshine up here in the Northeast. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And my parents' brother still live in Wisconsin, where we went to college, Wisconsin Whitewater.
As does my family. As does mine.
Plenty of snow I hear up there. Here it was a little colder today because it was in the 60s. But like right now, it feels like it's basically 80 outside. Yeah, so it's wonderful here.
Yeah, I know you gotta jab it in every once in a while, but it literally, during the pregame, I had to kind of go outside and do a few things, and I walked right out into literally an April blizzard.
Yeah,
it is coming down. It's probably not going to be as bad as Wisconsin. I talked to my dad, grumpy old man, and hopefully I don't get grumpy when I'm in my 80s. But this guy's pushing 90 years old, and he does not like snow in April. No, he's not digging that right now. But to all my friends out in Green Bay, where I'm from, I am so sorry you guys had to pull your snow blowers out again. I saw the pictures on Facebook. But you know what, Kevin? The weather has affected the Big Ten for spring. We were talking about it. Spring practice. Yeah, there's indoor facilities, but you can only do so much if you have an outdoor stadium and don't actually have an indoor stadium. I know you can practice inside, but a lot of these schools, they want to do their spring game and actually get some resemblance of a full 11-on-11. Even though we know that it's scripted, there's things that coaches want to see, things that can be manipulated as far as what play you're going to call, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of these schools couldn't even do their spring game due to the weather.
Yeah. That's, we joke about the weather from time to time. In this show, to start this show, there's actually somewhat of a reason for it, because we're talking about spring games, and we discussed last week on last week's Go Big or Go Home show. As always, follow us on Twitter at youngsteroldman. That's our show handle on Twitter. Again, all one word, at youngsteroldman. That's where we post all of our links for the 3-4 podcasts we do each week, including this show. Go up on SoundCloud, thanks to Troy, and also the grillingtruth.net, of course. But last week we talked about spring games. Troy is a big Wisconsin fan, big Wisconsin Badgers fan, doesn't care about the spring games. I'm a big Ohio State fan. I actually forgot to record Ohio State's spring game. I'll catch it at some point. But I've, seen highlights. I've read stats, heard some analysis stuff. But in the end, they're spring games. And we wanted to mention this week, for this week's show, spring games like Wisconsin's got canceled. Michigan's got canceled. I'm pretty sure I'd have to look it up to be certain, and I'm not going to get in deep into spring games. But as a whole, I think there was at least one of the schools that canceled theirs straight up. And I know Ohio State moved up their spring game time a few hours on this past Saturday. So some schools try to maneuver and make it happen. There's another school that moved it to Thursday, and it's escaping my mind who that was. But some schools really try to get the spring game in. Ohio State's, they've had huge attendance numbers for their spring games, like 100,000, 80,000+ for the last few years. They take pride.
I'm going to chime in real quick, youngster, while you're on your point here, because of the spring game. Many times there is a fee to get in that game, and it's a good way to get some extra money. And a lot of times we talked about budgets on this show from me being a prior coach. If you have that in your budget, X amount of dollars, X amount of attendance from that spring game, and you don't do it, that money, where's it coming from? It's just not falling out of the sky. So if it's one of the schools where there's a fee to get into the spring game, and I do think they charge a fee. I don't think it's for free. But that's in the budget. So if you're preparing your budget for next season, you're hoping to have X amount of dollars that was generated from that spring game, whether it be through gate proceeds, concessions, whatever it may be. That is in your budget. For a school to cancel a spring game, a lot of us are like, who cares? Not a big deal. But if I throw my coach's perspective in this and my athletic department experience, Kevin, they're kind of mad because they've lost that money. They're not getting it back. So don't think that it's just like, oh, it's a couple snow flurries, so they cancel it because it doesn't mean anything. To the players, we talked about this. Some of the guys that have been entrenched as starters, they don't really need to be out on the field and playing a game. Some guys that haven't got reps, it's great for them. But as a department and as a program, I will guarantee that they were gritting teeth. They were probably pounding tables, not wanting to cancel that game due to the monetary value that it has as an impact. Now, it's not huge when you're talking about Big Ten athletic department budgets, but that couple thousand or however many $1,000 it was, that can mean a lot because it's not just falling out of the sky, like I said. I just wanted to chime in there, youngster, because a lot of people might say, well, who cares? They cancel the spring game. There are financial implications to this game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as far as I know, I guess that I wanted to bring up was weather, and I don't know if these spring games, quote unquote, I guess, should be moved back. I don't necessarily know if they're entrenched in kind of early to mid-April for a reason. I don't know if they can be moved back to May just so there's more, I guess, chance of there not being huge weather issues. I think
we'd have to look at the NCAA rules, youngster. We'd have to pull up the football section of the NCAA bylaws and see when the practice time is and what the days are, because there's a certain period that they have to have and a certain amount of hours that they can have every week. So I don't know it off the top of my head, but I will let you know that it's probably due to the fact that the NCAA has whatever period, whatever time it is, and that's your time frame. And you have to get things accomplished within that time. So, is it a little bit biased? It could be, because the weather, it may affect teams in the South and in the West, rain and whatnot. But as far as snow and cold, yeah, the Midwest and Northeast had a huge disadvantage. And will the NCAA change it just for the Big Ten or, what the Northeast schools, the ACC, there's some teams up here. I don't think they will. So I think what we're looking at is we would have to look at the football bylaws and see what the practice time is for the spring. And I bet you that has a lot to do with it. A lot to do with when that game is played, youngster.
Yeah, you're probably right. Something I have not done, something I probably should do for one of our shows going forward, because we mentioned on last week's show, football is basically over outside of these spring games, which now they're all over. I believe actually there might be a couple this coming weekend. In any case, most of the spring games are over, if not all of them. I believe most of them. I want to say now, as I say it out loud, I'm pretty sure there are a couple left, maybe. But in any case, wanted to talk about spring games and just the weather impacting it. I don't know. Again, maybe it comes down to the NCAA and, like you said, Troy, not just the Big Ten, but any Northeast school, that's playing college football and has its spring game out in 30-degree weather. It's going to impact attendance, which impacts money for your school. It can impact a lot of things. As stupid as a spring game may seem to some fans and to even some players, realistically, it does have some implication, not going to say major implications on things, but there is some implications on things for these teams. But I guess I've got nothing else more on these spring games other than, and I'm not sure if I've even mentioned it yet because I know we talked about it in the pregame, but not to my knowledge, there has not been any insane injury like to just randomly Michigan State starting quarterback, out for the season due to an injury. I have not heard anything like that. Just in general,
either
for these spring games, I remember hearing something about someone starting tailback. It might have been Minnesota's, where there was something where it's like, okay, this might be a 2-month injury rehab process, which, again, we're in April. So March, April, May, June. Okay, he's back by July. That's perfectly fine, in terms of being back for the regular season. So to my knowledge, to Troy's knowledge, there has not been anything major. Maybe there has been some, undercover injury where that has not been reported, and maybe they're waiting for tests to go through. I don't know. But as we're doing this show, at least to our knowledge, there has not been some crazy injury, which also on last week's show, Troy, you mentioned you don't even watch Wisconsin spring game. You just want to hear that basically all these players are back healthy and ready for the regular season, which, at least to my knowledge, to your knowledge, that's the case, which is awesome, and I think it's lucky. Realistically, I think it's lucky.
That's all I want. That's all I want, Kevin. Not just being a Badger fan. Any school. I want. You look at the league, and you want the most competitive guys out there. So to have them come out of spring practice healthy, and the way social media is now, and the way things leak out, if there was a major injury, we would have heard about it. It's hard to keep that under wraps. So I think everybody has come out somewhat healthy, other than maybe some minor nicks and bruises, but it doesn't sound like there's been anything major as of yet. Now, that doesn't include, when these players get together and do some workouts on their own, you could still tear a knee running up a hill. So
right.
hopefully we don't hear about anything like that. But, like you said, I have nothing else on the spring games, Kevin. We can move along. I know you got another fiery subject to talk about.
NBA draft stuff. I just read the date for it. I think. Let me see here. Let me pull it up. As this loads, as my computer goes slow, of course. Basically, the NBA draft process. I think it's until April 22nd. I think is what I saw. I'll, ensure that date in a second here. But I think it's April 22nd is when the last day for college basketball players to sign their name and say, yes, I'll test the NBA draft waters. That doesn't mean necessarily anything, literally, except that they're going to participate in some of these kind of drills and combine stuff that the NBA puts on for NBA personnel to, look at these prospects and diagnose, what they think of these prospects and interview them, be able to tell them what to work on maybe for next year if they come back to school, and then go into the NBA draft process again next year. Maybe they hire an agent, then they absolutely are draft eligible. Basically, you have to, if you do hire an agent, you're automatically entered in the NBA draft, whether you get picked or not. You cannot go back to school if you hire an agent. There are a few players who already have. I don't even have that list in front of me. But there are a set number of guys from the Big Ten, which we'll talk about, I believe, for the rest of the show, unless you've got anything else, Troy, other than this NBA draft stuff. Actually, there is. Now that I say it out loud again, I remember something.
See, look at that. You're trying to tease me, pull me into the conversation, then you say, "Get away, old man." I see how you are.
Never mind. Just kidding. We've got something small, not necessarily small because it impacts me after this NBA draft process topic that Troy and I talk about. But this will be a shorter, in general, go big or go home show this week. We say that now, I guess. I can't say that until we're done. But basically, if you sign an agent, you have to go into the NBA draft. Obviously, if you're a senior and you use up your eligibility and you're not a graduate transferring out somewhere, there will absolutely be some Big Ten teams inheriting graduate transfers, just a matter of who they are. We don't necessarily know that yet. But a set of, I looked at players who are expected to sign an agent, players who are not expected to sign an agent, and also just top draft prospects according to Sports Illustrated. This is just Sports Illustrated. So this could be, it's not going to be miles off. Like, for instance, the top Big Ten NBA draft prospect is Jaren Jackson Jr., the freshman at Michigan State. Not any of the four sophomores that started this past year, but the freshman, 6'10", lengthy, can shoot the three. Huge NBA prospect, only 18 years old, maybe he's 19 now. Regardless, he's ranked number 3 overall by Sports Illustrated. That's not going to be crazy far off. He's not going to drop to 13. He's going to be somewhere in the top 10 because he oozes potential, if you want to say that. But so I wanted to run through the list of guys who it's basically confirmed, if not already confirmed, that they've signed an agent and are not coming back to college basketball next year. They're going into the NBA draft process to go to the NBA draft and be picked and play on an NBA team, Or, Troy, they could play for the G League if they don't make their NBA roster. Which
the wonderful Dreamer League. Hey, but I'll tell you, I guess, you know, that there's a good story. That kid, and I guess he's not a kid anymore, the 30-some-year-old guy that actually was in the minors for 10 years and got a chance to finish out the season with the Lakers. Good for him. I mean, he probably will not make the roster again next year for the Lakers. But, you know, there's guys that love the dream. They love the passion. I played amateur for a long time after college. You know, I coached. So for some people, they just love the game, and it's that dream to get to the big time. So I know why the league's there. It's just, you know, to me, I think the NBA could do a much better job marketing it to get a little more notoriety for the league. There's some good players. There's some good basketball down there. I mean, I've caught some games on TV. The thing that I noticed that stands out really to me when I'm watching on TV, there's nobody in the stands. Nobody at all. And I know these guys are going to play because they love to play. And I just think the NBA could do a much better job marketing that league. So as much as I make fun of it, Kevin, I know why it's there, and I know why the guys play. I mean, I played as long as I could. I really did, until I figured my body can't do this anymore, and I'm tired of running. You know, soccer, you run a lot. And I was just tired of running. You know, it was it. It was time. I didn't feel like running. But the league is there for a reason. I understand that. And for the guys playing, you know, they're doing it because they love the game. Maybe a percentage of them are going to get a chance. And I know that the NBA has utilized it more, where they can recall and they can send players down now, bring them back up and sign them. So I know they're trying to do more with it. I just think the NBA needs to get with the ball, and they need to market this minor league system much like Major League Baseball does. I've been to a ton of minor league baseball games, and some of these 5,000-seat stadiums are packed to the gill. So they need to do a better job marketing, and maybe it's the individual teams, I don't know. But the league, you know, I make fun of it, Kevin, but it's there for a reason. I just wish the NBA would market it better so that they can play in front of some fans.
Yeah. No, I had to look it up too. And I'm not actually 2 hours ago this story posted on NBA.com. Looking for player salaries in the G League. As soon as I Googled it, I saw it was $50,000 to $75,000. I'm curious. Actually, let's see here. Oh, it's a lot less than that. It's $7,000 a month, but it's 5 months. So you're getting paid $35,000 a year. Let's see here. Total of more than $3 million on top of there. So it depends on how far you go, I guess. But on average, this season, players earned an average of $44,000. So it's, you know, you're not making a ton of money, but I think that the point of going into the G League,
it's like having a regular job, youngster. You know, it's like me and you, blue collar. I guess I know I'm a white collar worker, but I guess, you know, blue collar, white collar guy. You know, making $40,000 for a few months of work. You're grabbing your lunchbox. You're going to work. And you're making an honest living. You know, they're not making the big time salary. They're making money like the common folk, like you and I.
Right.
People listening to this show. So that's why I said, you know, they're doing it for the love of the game with that hope that they can get that big NBA contract. At least they're able to go out and have fun doing it, and they're getting paid to do it. So that's kind of like the icing on top of the cake right there.
Yeah, getting paid $7,000 a month is not a bad thing. I'll sign up for that as soon as I get, you know, a full-time gig with whatever. I'd be more than happy to make $7,000 a month. I'll say that right now. I'd be very happy. That's what, $84,000. Just did it on the top of my head. $84,000 a year. Sign me up. I'm done. You want to say that that's my cap in life? That's fine. Perfectly happy with that. So not to say that they're making that the other 7 months of the year, but in any case, like you said, Troy, they're making an honest living. They can live on that. But again, at least half these players have the realistic shot in their head, at least. And I don't think it's not even outside their head. I think that half the players in the G League have some sort of chance of getting better, whether it's over the course of 1 year or 10 years, like the guy in the Lakers. of making an NBA roster. And if he does well for a 2-week stretch and he gets a 1-year deal for $7 million, it's like, okay, sign me up for that. 1 year, $7 million to prove yourself after proving yourself in the G League, and maybe for your 1 or 2 week stint, and say the Lakers sign that guy for a 1-year deal. It probably wouldn't be for $7 million, but even the worst guys in the NBA make, what is it, $2-3 million? The NBA veteran, league minimum is something around $2-3 million. So, I think for a lot of these guys, it's about making it to the NBA. To do it solely for fun, to make $7,000 a month doing that for half the year, that's not too bad. But in any case, I'll move on finally. Big Ten prospects. I wanted to mention where they're ranked, just again, according to Sports Illustrated. And again, it's Sports Illustrated. It's not any head honcho and NBA personnel guy who is, right on track with where these guys are going to get selected, but in the right ballpark. Like I said before, Jaren Jackson Jr., Michigan State freshman, he's at 3. And interject whenever you want, Troy, with these rankings if you have anything to note in any of these cases. Miles Bridges, 13th, Michigan State sophomore. Again, ranked 13th. Bruno Fernando, which is a name that we did not really talk about much at all. A freshman big at Maryland. We talked a lot about their sophomores. But this Fernando guy didn't have huge numbers, but again, just poses as a future NBA body, if not NBA body now. Sports Illustrated says he's the 22nd.
I'm going to interact. Look at that. I'm going to interact after you mention the name Bruno.
Yeah.
So here we go. If you look at the NBA draft and you look at these young guys coming out, part of the draft, unless you're a surefire guy, the NBA draft is a lot about what is the potential for the future. I mean, right. the teams in the lottery, they need a guy now that's proven, right? A guy that can step on the court and play now. But once you get past, usually even maybe pick 8 or 9, right, these guys in the first round are going to teams that are pretty good, and they got pretty good players, maybe young players. And so what the team is doing is they're basically rolling the dice to try and find this raw talent that they think they can develop into an NBA superstar. That's why we've talked about it on this show. Players that stay 4 years or 5 years in college basketball now, very unlikely, very hard, with the exception being my guy from Milwaukee, Brogdon, the guy that stayed at Virginia for 5 years. That doesn't happen very often where you're going to come in and make an impact on a team. These teams want these young guys. They want the projects. They want to have it. They're going to roll the dice. Because in the NBA, you don't have, a 52-man roster. You don't have this, even in baseball, 40-man roster and so much in the minor leagues. In the NBA, basically, your 12-man roster is your 12-man roster. That's what it is. And it's hard to break that. So what these guys are doing in the draft, unless it's a surefire talent that is automatically going to be on the roster, they're looking for players to develop. That's the way the draft works in the NBA. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin. That's my assumption. That's the way I look at how these teams draft that are not in the lottery. They're looking at players overseas or somebody that can possibly in 2 or 3 years make an impact. I mean, how many times do we see a team select somebody from overseas, and then as you're reading the draft update, you're reading, well, they've got a commitment to, I'll just use Barcelona, for example, to Barcelona for 2 more years. They're under contract. They can't even come to the NBA for 2 more years. But they decided to put their name in the draft, and they got drafted in the first round because that team likes the potential. And I see a lot of that recently in the NBA. It's not about picking players that can come right now on my roster and help my team win next year. Again, if you're in the lottery, that's different. But outside of the lottery, Kevin, I see a lot of that, a lot of prospects, a lot of projects, and you hear it all the time, every year after the NBA draft. Well, this guy's a project. This guy's got to work on this. May spend, some time as the, 10th man on the bench, maybe see 3-4 minutes, which I don't think helps a player develop. But a lot of times, like a guy like Bruno, probably going to get drafted, maybe not in the lottery, but he'll get drafted because the team likes his size. He likes all of the intangibles that he has, and they think they can develop him because he's the typical monstrous body that they're looking for and hoping that he can develop a game. And you can chime in there on what I just said.
Yeah. I'll say this, too, that, for instance, for Sports Illustrated, they had Jalen Brunson, the point guard from Villanova, who's, one player of the year and who I've loved since coming out of high school. That's a guy who impacts the college basketball game as much as just about anybody outside of course, Mr. DiVincenzo in the title game. But Brunson has been phenomenal, throughout last season for Villanova and absolutely helped them, even though he didn't have a monstrous game, win the title. He, as a prospect, is in the 20s. And for me personally, it's like, my God, how can this guy be in the 20s? It's because people think maybe he's tapped out. He's already a junior. How much growth really is there? Just taking him as an example, there's Colin Sexton from Alabama who didn't have the same exact impact as Brunson, but he is going to be a lottery pick. He's going to be probably the top point guard taken ahead of Brunson. Why? Because he's a freshman. He's got another 2 years of developing just to get into Brunson's age. So he's got another 2 years to get better. And so that's what you're taking, even in the top 5, top 1, top 10, especially in the top. I think, to me, it's based on potential because you're getting teams like the Sixers over the last few years or the Cavs without LeBron. You're taking guys like Kyrie Irving who, as a freshman, as an 18-year-old, they're going to step in the NBA and score 20 a game? There's basically nobody who does that ever except LeBron, basically. To step into the NBA year one and average 20. There's just no one who does it. Nobody's ready to truly impact the game. Even guys like Brogdon a year ago who win Rookie of the Year, they do really well. They can start, but they're not hugely impacting the game, and that's the Rookie of the Year. Guys 18, 19 years old, to find a Ben Simmons who's 20 and playing his real first year this year and really impacting the game, it almost never happens. That's why everyone's on Ben Simmons' bandwagon, because guys that young, it takes time.
Isn't it funny, youngster? Isn't it funny, though, how, like, a Ben Simmons, like you said, that's not the norm. But now that he's done it, it's a copycat league, so everybody thinks that's what's going to happen. And it's not the norm. I mean, look at all the ones that have failed ahead of him. Teams have tried and tried and tried and tried, and teams fail and fail and fail. But Ben Simmons comes out and, I'll tell you what, this guy's playing phenomenal right now. Single-handedly may help the Sixers win a series. The guy's that good. But to me, that's an anomaly. That is not something that happens every time you try and go down this road. But teams are going to. They see the success there with Ben Simmons, so they're going to try and do the same thing. I don't agree with it, but teams are hopeful. I guess, people listening to this show, our fan base, a lot of people are optimists. They're optimistic. Oh, it worked for them, it'll work for me. It doesn't work that way. But, to me, Ben Simmons is an anomaly, youngster. I had to chime in there.
Yeah, no, for sure. I just wanted to mention, too, that it's like Jaren Jackson is the third-rated prospect. He doesn't impact the game as much as Miles Bridges, as Jalen Brunson, not even close. You have, for example, I'll go way down. I'll skip some names. Bruno Fernando at 22. We hardly ever talked about him on the show. Mo Wagner's rated 62nd. Mo Wagner has a heck of an impact on a college game, but some people are questioning his athleticism at the next level, and if he is that quick enough to be a huge mismatch at the next level. Some people just don't know. And again, he's a junior. So he doesn't have, not that he can't get a lot better, because it depends on who you are, really. How much
I guess I should let the listeners know. It's not like we're counting these juniors as like old men like me.
Right.
I mean, they're still in their early 20s. But you're seeing, again, what I just mentioned about Simmons at 20. These NBA teams are trying to get these guys that are young, that are good players. And guys like Kobe and LeBron that did it right out of high school kind of ruins it for everyone else, youngster. It really does. Because, again, you're talking about guys that are raw talent, guys that come around once every couple of years. And, maybe it's the Ben Simmons time. But is there another young guy that's going – and, again, I should even say this. With Ben Simmons, it's still so early. He hasn't done it over the course of 10 years. So then the debate will be, well, these guys should just be able to go right out of high school. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. I mean, but if you want to, there's ways to do it. You had mentioned on the show, was it last week? The kid that's going right out of high school into the G League? There you go.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to do, then do it. You can do that. You just can't play in the bigs for 2 more years. So if you really just want to play basketball as a career, do it. But I think these kids miss so much by not having some kind of college experience. I really do. And so circling back to my point, this whole Ben Simmons thing is he's done it for a year. He needs to do it now for about 9 more to show that, this is what happens. But I know where you're going with these rankings, Kevin, and what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from what you're saying is the young guys are automatically getting placed ahead of older guys.
Yep.
Just because there's more, and I'm air quoting, more potential for these guys, which, 2 years? 2 years? Oh, my God, 2 more years on your body. But I do agree with something you said about dominates at the college level. You and I have talked about this. Player can be a dominant, and we talked about it not only in basketball but in football. Guys can be great college athletes and dominate at the college game, but they just can't bring it to the next level. That is a fair assessment if that's what a scout thinks, because it happens more than we think, Kevin. Everybody's like, oh, what a great college player. This guy's going to be a phenomenal pro. Well, no. Really break down his game. Is he going to be a phenomenal pro, a.k.a. Tim Tebow? Great college player. I'll never take that away from Tim Tebow. Johnny Manziel. We've talked about him on the show. Great college player, Kevin. Great college player. I will never go back and say, oh, my God, Johnny Manziel's a terrible football player. He was a terrible NFL player. He was a great college player because he was athletic against guys that weren't as athletic. And he had wonderful receivers that all he had to do was chuck the ball to him. But he was very athletic. He could get out of the pocket, he could buy time, and he had the arm strength to get it down to Mr. Evans. So, to me, Manziel was a great college quarterback. But it didn't equate to the NFL, nor did I think it would. So when you mention that to me, I have no problem with these scouts and how they're ranking these players if that's what they feel, that, hey, this guy's great in the college game, but it's not going to equate to the bigs. You know what? Maybe for some of these players, youngster, it puts a chip on their shoulder. Like, oh, you really think I can't play in the NBA? You watch. I'm going to work my ass off, and I'm going to go do this. And good for them. So I wanted to throw that out there because sometimes a lot of us think, oh, man, this guy's a great player. Yeah, in college. But the next step, no matter what sport you're talking about, is just so much more intense. And you have to be one of the best. And not all great college athletes are going to be able to play at the next level.
Yeah, and some of these guys, too, it depends on the system and where you get drafted. Guys like Isaiah Thomas get picked 60th overall, and they can become an MVP candidate. Or Draymond Green can be picked in the second round in the 30s, and he's, the most versatile defender in the NBA and can defend 1 through 5. His value is insane. There are guys that just get missed, and Draymond Green comes out as, I think it was a senior, either a junior or senior, I think it was a senior, and, he automatically gets pushed back into the 30s, even though he's a phenomenal college basketball player, because it's like, what is he? 6'7", 6'8", what's he going to be? A big in the NBA? No. Well, actually, yes. In today's NBA, he is. But so it goes to show that any of these rankings, whether it's Sports Illustrated, whether it's, whichever NBA guru you want to follow, not that I'm huge on, Sports Illustrated's rankings, but it's just food for thought for those listening to this show. As I go down the list, and I'll keep it quick, but another Maryland name passed Fernando at 22, Justin Jackson, Maryland sophomore, at 38. So there's a big gap there. There's Jaren Jackson Jr. at 3, Bridges 13, both of those guys lottery picks. Bruno Fernando at 22, although he's supposedly not even going to sign an agent. That's out there. Justin Jackson, sophomore from Maryland, at 38. So now we're getting into the second round. These guys who are not seniors, and none of these guys are that I'm about to list except for one of them, is even in the top 80. And remember, only 60 get picked. So just keep that in mind. Tony Carr, a sophomore point guard from Penn State, is at 40. again, he's supposed to intends on signing an agent. To me, at that point, if you're probably going to be a second-round pick and you're a sophomore, why pass on another year in college? I don't understand it personally. That's just me. Kata Bates-Diop at 49. He's a junior. Kevin Herter at Maryland. He's a sophomore at 51. Like I mentioned before, Mo Wagner, junior in Michigan, 62. Carson Edwards down at 70, which I don't understand. Sophomore, Purdue, point guard. He's not supposed to sign an agent. Vincent Edwards, a Purdue senior, the only senior that I'm listing actually for any of these names, down at 72. He's obviously going to go
senior.
Through.
Holy cow, a senior in the NBA draft. That doesn't happen very often anymore.
No.
Not from the big time schools.
No. And then there's a group of 3 names, which very interesting to me. All juniors, not even in the top 80 in terms of prospect rankings here. LaRon Black from Illinois, a junior, supposed to be signing an agent or already has, one or the other here. Jack McVeigh from Nebraska, a junior, again, not in the top 80, intends on signing an agent or already has. Corey Sanders, junior from Rutgers, not in the top 80, has either signed an agent or intends to. I don't necessarily understand that. That's just me. Like I mentioned, even going into the 40s and high 30s, I don't necessarily understand why you wouldn't go back to school. That's just me. Maybe your family is extremely poor and you need to get to the NBA as soon as possible to make $2 million. I fully get that.
But here's the thing, youngster. If you're not picked in the first round, your money's not guaranteed.
No, right.
You got to be a first-round pick to be guaranteed money.
Yeah.
Anybody in the second round, it's not a guaranteed contract. Yeah, you're going to sign a contract, but there's no guarantee. And so I look at it, of the names you mentioned, I just wanted to mention one, and then we can move on. I think Sanders, probably very, very underestimated in where he is in this list. I think he's much better than where you had him. What was it, like 80?
Yeah, beyond 80, past 80.
I think if he plays at a better school, I think if he plays at an Ohio State, a Wisconsin, a Michigan, a bigger time school, I think he moves up probably about half of where he's at now. I think that kid's a phenomenal player. It's just he played on a crap team. So, I look at it. I'm not saying that he's a lottery pick or anything like that, but he's a guy, in my mind, that is a good player. And when you look at it, he's a good player, and I still think he's probably in the 40s somewhere. You're maybe hoping to get drafted at that point. And if you're drafted in the second round, that's no guarantee you're making the big roster, especially with the development of the G League and them able to put guys down. You got to remember, you're coming out. You might be one of the best this year in college basketball. But guess what? There's this thing called, I call it the Dreamer League. We all know that. So the Dreamer League has the best from last year and the year before and the year before that. Are you better than all those guys? Because for you to make the roster in the NBA is no given. And I look at it and I just think sometimes the wrong advice is given to some of these guys. I understand you want to go out and you want to try to help your family, but unless you're a first-round draft pick, you're not guaranteed crap. And I can understand some of these guys where, there's nothing left for me to do. This is where my stock is the highest. And like you and I were talking about, Kevin, and I joked about it, a senior on that list. If you go back, are you really going to help your draft stock, or is it going to be about the same next year? And so if you're getting older and you can't really improve your draft stock, fine, then go out and take your chance, because you're not going to do anything next year to make yourself get drafted in that first round. I can understand that. It's just the world of the NBA is such a different beast, Kevin. It's unbelievable. So many great players that we never even hear about because they're in the Dreamer League. And then the guys that go there, do they stick it out? Because think about it, great players, conference players of the year down there, All-Americans down in the Dreamer League, and they're not getting the call up. How frustrating is that, Kevin? I mean, I was an athlete, and I can imagine how I'd feel. I'm busting my hump. I'm doing everything I can do. I think I'm at the top of my game, and I'm still not getting the call to the big team. It's got to be frustrating, you know? We hear about stories in Major League Baseball, guys hanging out in the minors for 10 years before they get called up. That is a lot of dedication. That is a lot of perseverance. I mean, I give credit, and those are feel-good stories. But, man, think about all the guys that don't make it 10 years because after 2 or 3, they're like, screw this. It's not going to happen. I don't have time for this. I need to support my family. I'm going to go get a real job. But, I dropped out of school, so now I don't even have a college degree. So now I got to go down the road and I got to work in the factory. And there's nothing wrong with that, so people don't get on me for saying that. My son actually works in a factory at 24 years old, and I think he does great for himself. But my point is some of these guys are misled when they could have stayed in school under scholarship, Kevin, got a college degree, and went out and still supported their family, not with millions and millions of dollars, but it would be a lot better than being misinformed. Oh, you're a great player. Yeah, you're ranked 50th. Let's sign me. I'm your agent. Then you don't get drafted. You're in the G League. You don't have a college degree now. And now in 4 years, now you've got to humble yourself and go take a blue-collar job because you decided to leave school when it was free because some darn agent wanted to try to make money off you. And I'm sorry I'm going on a rant right now. You've got to get me worked up about something every show, and this is the one that does it because these guys are misinformed because of the greedy agent. Yeah, these are great players in college, but you brought it up. Doesn't always equate to the NBA. And now there's every situation is different, youngster, where you should go. And you got a chance, great. Do it. But I would say this. If I had the time and I had the resources, I would literally go research some of this. All of the guys that have declared for the draft or signed an agent left school and left all of their education on the table. Yeah, you can always go back. Now, we hear that. Don't we hear that all the time, Kevin, from players?
Yep.
I plan on going back. I plan on going back. Come on now. The amount of people that actually go back and get that degree, probably 10%, if that, and I'm probably being generous.
Just look around your workforce, whoever you work for. I think unless you're in some, hugely successful occupation where obviously people have their degrees and are done getting degrees or furthering their education, I can look at one of my stock jobs that I have, and it's like, how many people do I know going to some, very small college hoping to get a degree while working, part-time at a stock job? And it's like, I plan on going back in the fall, or, I am going back, but it's taken me, 3-4 years to take, 1 or 2 classes at a time. And it's just like, eventually, more often than not, you don't go back because it's so hard to go back and dedicate that time and that money while you're living on your own or supporting a family. It's just hard, whether you're an athlete or a normal human being, to go back to school and finish a degree and get, make something of it. It's very hard to do that. So I'm very glad that I finished, my time at Whitewater in 5 years. Took me 5 years, but I'm glad I'm done so that now I don't have to go back.
4.5 over here, youngster, 4.5. It doesn't take 4 years anymore. And that's even back in the early 90s took me 4.5.
Yeah.
So it takes time. That's a great point that you bring up. Now, again, we're going to make it a short show. We're still below our regularly allotted time. But where do you want to move this conversation to, or do you want to let the wonderful listeners go for the week?
Well, I wanted to mention too some names. You may be an Iowa basketball fan, and you hear Tyler Cook, NBA draft. Testing the waters. I wanted to mention these group of names just for those fans of particular schools or players, and hearing NBA draft, and it's like, what are you doing? You should not go to the NBA draft. Here's a group of players who plan on going, but will not sign an agent, have not, will not. They plan on coming back to school. Carson Edwards is one of those names from Purdue. I want to mention him first. Also, Bruno Fernando, like I mentioned, with Maryland, although it's interesting to me, being a freshman, not having a huge impact, and yet NBA scouts are still saying you're going to be a first-round pick. Interesting to me if he decides to come back. It will obviously be certainly interesting if guys like Justin Jackson from Maryland, guys like Kevin Huerter from Maryland, all come back and they're all healthy. I know Maryland missed out on a guy, I think it was Jackson, due to I think it was a torn labrum for most of the year. That sucked for Maryland. But if they get all these guys back for next year, they could be very interesting. But so these group of players I just wanted to mention, Tyler Cook from Iowa, sophomore forward, plans on not signing an agent, plans on coming back, but plans on going through the NBA draft process, hearing from NBA personnel, and then within 10 days after that, little combine, hearing back from NBA people, you can rescind your name and come back to school. Tyler Cook's one of those for Iowa. Isaac Copeland for Nebraska, who's a junior. Ethan Happ, Wisconsin, junior. Jawan Morgan, Indiana, a junior. James Palmer, Nebraska, a junior. Nick Ward from Michigan State, a sophomore. All these guys plan on coming back. Even though they're testing the waters, I think it's awesome that they can do that. I guess that's my last point is the NFL, you can't do that. If you're Leonard Fournette and you're a junior, you get through your first 3 years, or you're Christian McCaffrey, you get through your first 3 years, and it's like, should I go or should I spend one more year and really finalize myself as a prospect, maybe move myself up 10 spots, 15 spots, around 2 rounds, especially in the NFL, you can obviously do that. What should I do? Let me go to the NFL draft combine and get word from NFL personnel, and let's see where I'm at. They can't do that. The NBA, you can. Ethan Happ can do that. He can say, okay, I'm going to get picked 60th maybe. Well, if that's the case, let me come back to Wisconsin. I think it's absolutely smart. I don't know why basically literally every single one of these prospects doesn't do that. Or even if you're not a prospect, even if you're a backup shooting guard for Texas A&M, and you're getting 5 minutes a game, why not go into this process and just work out, do the drills, hear from NBA personnel if that's your goal, and say, hey, what do I need to work on? If you know it's getting to the hoop because you're just a sharpshooter, that's fine. Then you hear that, you come back to school. It literally doesn't hurt you whatsoever to go through this process. So any of these guys, Cook, Copeland, Happ, Fernando, Edwards, Morgan, Palmer, Ward, all these guys, kudos to going through this process and then just coming back, because it hurts you absolutely nothing to do that. It only helps you. It also gets you to see where you're at against guys like Jaren Jackson Jr. or against Colin Sexton or against Jalen Brunson or whoever. I think it's great. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't necessarily have a talking point outside of it, but I think hats off to these guys who are willing to go because it only helps you. So for Ethan Happ, for example, for you, Troy, I think it's smart. Hear from NBA guys, what's it going to take for me to get drafted? If it's just developing a three-point shot, then he knows what he has to work on next year. It's that simple. So that's all I've got. There is one other topic that we mentioned in the pregame show, Troy, that we talk about before the podcast that I wanted to mention as well. But unless you've got anything on not signing agents, guys coming out of college, terrible wording there, but this group of guys that plan on not signing an agent, going through the process and just coming back. Any words on that? Otherwise, we can move to our last quick topic.
Oh, no, I actually, like you said, it's a unique thing that the NBA is allowing these players to do. Part of me, though, thinks, man, these teams are kind of rolling the dice, and you wonder if these players are actually kind of hurting their draft stock instead of helping it. Like being a Wisconsin guy, Ethan Happ. Okay, could he play at the next level? I don't think he's ever going to be like a dominant starter in the NBA, but he's got the size. He's got some athleticism. I think he could be a good bench player in the NBA. But is he scaring teams into taking him in the draft higher than what he should be? No. And so it actually could be a detriment that, hey, you know what? This guy didn't sign an agent. He may want to go back to school. He's sitting there late in the second round. We're going to pass on him because if we draft him, he may go back to school, and then we kind of are crap out of luck here. So I like what they're doing from a player's perspective, but I think it also plays into the minds of some people in the draft if they haven't declared and they haven't signed an agent and they're very boisterous or their intentions are, well, I'm going to see how it goes, and then if I don't like where I'm drafted, I'll go back to school. I think it could hurt some of these players that are, middle second round or lower. Like, oh, you know what? This kid might not be happy we draft him here, so let's go for this guy that has an agent. We know that we're going to have the rights to him, but if I draft this guy and he goes back to school, I'm crap out of luck. That's all I got to add there, youngster.
Well, I guess I'll say this, after 10 days after this process, whenever this combine stuff happens, before the draft, you have until 10 days after to make it known that you're coming back to college. So you can't take a guy that's not, if you select a guy in the NBA draft, he's yours. He cannot go back to college. So whether you're signing an agent after 10 days after this process, because you have to, if you're saying you're not going back to school, then you're automatically in the NBA draft, whether you get picked or not. So for the guys that aren't signing agents like Carson Edwards, if he hears from NBA personnel that you should go back to school because you're probably going to get picked in late to second round, then that's okay. He hears that. He has 10 days from hearing that to come back to school. If he doesn't and he decides, okay, I'm going to go into the draft, then he'll sign an agent. And so all the guys that get drafted cannot come back, or all the guys that are eligible for the draft and can hear their name get picked. Basically, you can't, if you're an NBA team, you can't pick, say Carson Edwards says he's coming back to school, you can't pick him 60th overall because he's going back to school. He hasn't hired an agent. He's not draft eligible, even though realistically he is, but you can't pick him because he has decided he's going back to school. Teams don't do that, basically. So it's only the guys that eventually do sign agents, and you can go to this process, and then 10 days after, you have to make your decision 10 days after, which is before the NBA draft actually occurs, whether you're going to school, coming back to school, or you're going all in on the NBA draft. If you're going all in on the NBA draft and you don't get picked, you still can't come back to school because you went all in on the NBA draft and you said you were not coming back. Basically, if you're saying you're going all in on the NBA draft and you're not coming back to school, then you're hiring an agent and you're done playing college basketball. So there's no picking a guy who plans on coming back, because basically the NBA draft is after that 10-day period, whenever it is.
Oh, okay.
I don't have the dates in front of me. But
all right.
So yeah, to me, it's kind of a no loss. I guess what you can do if you're Ethan Happ in terms of hurting your stock, so to say, is, you show up for these drills and you show why you're not a top 60 prospect. And it's like, yeah, you need to work on a 3-ball game, and if that doesn't drastically improve, then we really know we're not going to pick you whenever you do become draft eligible, which would be next year in 2019. I guess that could hurt you that way, but to me, it's almost a no-loss situation for these guys that plan on coming back anyway, like Carson Edwards. It's like, yeah, you're saying I'm going to be a second-round pick. What do I need to work on? And I plan on coming back to school. What do I need to work on to be a first-round pick next year in 2019? And he can take that info and understand what he has to work on. But if he decides to go all in on the NBA draft, that means he's signing an agent. That means he cannot come back to college basketball. So just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if you've got anything else, Troy. Otherwise, we can mention this Comcast Big Ten Network thing.
Nope, I got nothing else.
So, yeah, Comcast, Big Ten Network. Basically, if you're watching television through Comcast, some version of Comcast, and you have Big Ten Network, I believe it's every single state that does not have a Big Ten team in it. It's not necessarily just the northern part of the country or the northeastern part of the country or the midwestern part of the country. I believe it's any state that has a Big Ten team in it. I believe that's the case. If you have the Big Ten Network through Comcast, like for me, for example, I have a Comcast. I watch TV through some sort of Comcast, whatever it's called. It's Comcast something. So for me in Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, I can no longer get the Big Ten Network. They have cut that off. There was actually a tweet. It was kind of funny. I believe the Big Ten Network threw out a tweet, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, saying like, hey, Comcast is not letting you guys outside of Big Ten states, basically, that don't have these schools. They literally put on their Twitter account, tell Comcast how you feel, because we're not happy about it. So it's interesting to me because for me, I cannot watch the Big Ten Network anymore down here in Jacksonville, Florida, because I go through Comcast. So either I have to convince my fiance's parents to go through another television provider, or I'm
DirecTV.
Oh, I love DirecTV. My parents have DirecTV. I loved it. That's what I would choose, but I'm not going to be able to convince my fiance's parents to switch over. I already know that. But for me, for basically the past couple of years, living here, basically the past year, I've been hooked on BTN to go. I haven't forked up the money even myself for Big Ten Network down here because I know I can watch everything on my computer, on a tablet, on whatever, because of BTN to go. So I guess a quick plug to BTN to go. But in any case, that's how I've watched all the Big Ten stuff, is actually online. So live as it's happening, as it's being streamed. That's how I've watched my, bulk of Big Ten stuff that's not on Fox Sports 1, Fox, ABC, ESPN, whatever. That's how I've watched. So it impacts me, I guess, theoretically. For any Big Ten fan in the state of Florida, like me, it impacts you if you have been watching Big Ten stuff through Comcast. It sucks. There's not much else, I guess, I have to say about it, other than it sucks. And it's going to impact, I think, the conference in terms of viewership, because not necessarily everyone who graduates from Penn State stays in Pennsylvania. They might go to Florida, or they might go to California, or they might go to wherever, Wyoming, So you can't be a fan of this, because it's just eliminating a majority of the country that can't watch the Big Ten. As far as stuff that's on the Big Ten Network, again, I think Sports One has a Big Ten basketball deal now, so a lot of the Big Ten basketball is on Fox Sports One now. But for Big Ten Network stuff, Comcast people, it just sucks for them. That's basically all I have on it. So yeah, unless you've got anything else.
It just comes down to money, youngster. It's all about the money. Yeah. It's all about the greenback.
No matter what we talk
money. Yeah, everything eventually will go back to money. Yeah. Luckily for me, I have DirecTV. I'm never getting rid of DirecTV. I've had DirecTV. I love NFL Sunday Ticket. I love all the options that I have with pay-per-view, and Big Ten Network is part of that programming. So at some point, though, if DirecTV is not giving the money to the Big Ten, or Big Ten's not giving DirecTV enough money, it'll be gone there too. It's all about the dollar. It's all about greed. It's not about viewership. It's not. I mean, it is about viewership. Don't get me wrong, but it's not about the viewers. It's not about the consumer. Comcast could care less about the consumer. I know that the Big Ten said, "Hey, tweet your displeasure." That's not going to do anything. Doesn't matter. Right. It does not matter. The viewers don't matter in this situation, nor will they ever. They don't put a poll out, "Hey, should we pull Big Ten Network?" No. The people are going to say no. Some people are going to say, "I don't care." Some people don't care. But if you're listening to this podcast, you definitely do care if you're in one of those states that you have Comcast and can't get the Big Ten Network anymore. But again, it's never about the consumer, even though every business that's out there, you look at their business model or the mission statement or the vision, it always says it's about the consumer. That's a bunch of BS. I've been in business a long time. Yeah, you got to keep the consumer happy. At the end of the day, it's about, are you making a profit? Where's the profit margin? And somewhere in between making money, you try to make the consumer happy. So when people say we're all about the consumer, I just giggle. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's not about us. It's about your bottom dollar. It's about your profit line. That's all it is. And so, sucks to be you, youngster. I have DirecTV. I guess I could video record stuff and send it to you if there's something on the Big Ten Network you want to see. But I don't know if you got anything else for the listeners today. But again, short show. We still go over an hour. That's the way we are.
Yeah, I hear you. Next week's show, I don't know. We do not have, at least to my knowledge, we don't have a topic to perfectly discuss. Although I'll say this, that NFL draft is taking place. That's something we can talk about right there. It takes me 2 seconds to figure out
the
a topic.
NFL draft. Maybe talk a little lacrosse. Maybe some softball. Maybe some baseball. We can go to some of the other Big Ten sports maybe. But if Gizmo didn't like that idea,
then you heard him.
Yeah, Gizmo didn't like that idea, so maybe we won't do that. But if you have any ideas for us, find us on Twitter at YoungsterOldMan is our show handle, at TroyRobert967, or at KidCunny, KIDCUNI. Find us on Twitter. Let us know what you want us to talk about next week. Have a great week, everybody. Kevin and I'll get back with you soon.